Top boxing news.
Okay, we'll start with this. The effort to help sell Spence versus Thurman as a junior middleweight, non-title box office fight has already begun. Company man and former champion PBC fighter Ugas took to his social media and stated, "Unbelievable that this fight looks like it's going to happen, but to surprise, at 154 pounds and no titles on the line. It's still a great fight with some of the best lads of this generation."
Who wrote this? Ugas or Monty Python?
What a disappointment. Amazing how that undisputed 147-pound championship fight wasn't made. In our Spence versus Ugas fight, I made Spence the pledge that the winner would follow, no excuses, for the fight for 4 belts. Truth, Spence did his part. He signed his contract, and Crawford took his $15 million contract in a historic boxing fight and responded with excuses and announcing his fight against Evanesian for $10 million. But it's good that these things happen. So many fans give more value to the fighters who always want to fight against the best, who always want to give great fights to the fans.
So now what Ugas is saying is that Crawford walked away from $15 million.
It would help Ugas' side of the story if he were actually a party to those negotiations.
He wasn't.
It would help his story loads if he were actually involved in that fight.
He wasn't.
But he wasn't. And it would help his story loads.
Where Ugas is claiming that Crawford walked away from $15 million, Errol Spence Jr. himself confirmed that neither one of them stood to make any guaranteed cash from the fight. Errol himself confirmed neither one of those two guys were getting a guarantee.
So what is this guy talking about?
He's running spin.
He's trying to help Errol save face because Errol's coming under criticism that he's facing Keith Thurman at junior middleweight for no titles at all when the undisputed title fight is there.
Crawford is free.
If you really wanted to fight him and you wanted to make this fight, the door is open. But you're fighting Keith Thurman, who you said you would never fight, on the premise that the WBC ordered it.
Then why is it at 154 for no title at all?
I mean, that's what the reports say. It's a junior middleweight contest for no title at all, so how could the premise for the match be that the WBC ordered it when it's not even a title fight?
Them ordering the fight at 147 pounds, but allowing you to have it at 154 is tantamount to them letting you blow the weight.
That's what it basically is. How could they allow their reigning champion at welterweight to make a title defense in a non-title fight above welterweight?
You order a fight between a champion and a challenger, and that champion walks in there a couple of ounces over the welterweight limit. What's supposed to happen?
Well, he's supposed to get stripped. That's what usually happens. So the idea that Errol is only fighting Keith because the WBC told him to do it, ordered it.
That's bullshit.
It's a cockamamie cover story. It's a cockamamie excuse, because if they're giving you that much consideration that they're allowing this fight to happen at junior middleweight, surely they would have given you consideration for the undisputed title fight. The difference is you don't want the undisputed title fight.
You never did, and neither did Al Heyman.
This is about saving face, folks, and Ugas' comments are little more than a company man towing the company line. Their thoughts, their opinions, they're not even their own.
The ones that they express publicly, like Ugas' comments seen here.
This is a spin job intended to alleviate pressure on Errol Spence Jr. to take on Terrence Crawford.
This is a spin job to help him save face.
For many, common sense is kicking in. If the WBC would go as far as allowing Errol to have this fight at 154 pounds, then surely they would have allowed him to go straight into a Crawford fight if he wanted to go straight into a Crawford fight.
They're letting him fight above welterweight without stripping him.
So what are you trying to convince me of? That if he were fighting Crawford next instead of Keith, they would have stripped him?
They won't strip him for fighting well above welterweight where he holds a title with them, but they'll strip him for trying to unify this division. Is that...
Give me a break. He's fighting a quasi-retired fighter who's a much safer choice than Terrence Crawford on the premise that Keith Thurman still has any kind of name value.
We all know that he doesn't. His last box office fight sold next to nothing.
It's not 2017, you know, and all these mental gymnastics we're seeing are a desperate attempt.
A veiled attempt to try and save face and help sell this fight.
A few facts and stats about the former champion Keith Thurman. You know, this is a guy who
fought once?
In about 3 years, he's only fought once, just once, and that was the Mario Barrios fight in the first quarter of last year.
In February.
February of last year. We're already in the first quarter of this year. The night of the fight, it will have been over a year's time since Keith Thurman saw action.
This guy's supposed to be elite, 1 fight in 3 years, inactive for over a year?
It's been well over a year since Keith Thurman beat a top 10 opponent. 6, actually. 6 years since Keith Thurman banked a solid win over a top 10 fighter in this division. He hasn't beat a top 10 fighter since 2017 when he shared the ring with Danny Garcia.
Took a 2-year hiatus after that, in case you forgot.
Comes back 2 years after the Danny Garcia fight, goes life or death with Josecito Lopez, barely survives, moves on to a Pacquiao fight with an aged 40-year-old Manny Pacquiao who sits him on his back pocket and beats him, and that was well over 2 years ago.
It's 3, actually.
Comes back in February of last year, takes on a super lightweight who had moved up to welterweight, Mario Barrios, a guy who in his last fight got stopped by a lightweight, Gervonta Davis.
He fights a guy at 147 who got stopped at 140, though he himself could not stop him, and you're telling me that this guy is elite?
Mario Barrios, that same Mario Barrios would go 12 rounds with Terrence Crawford. You're telling me that these people defending Keith Thurman wouldn't trash Terrence Crawford?
You're telling me that these people defending Keith Thurman wouldn't trash a Virgil Ortiz if he went 12 rounds with that same Mario Barrios?
The arguments being made in defense of Spence versus Thurman as a fight seem to rely on a sheer lack of common sense.
A functioning brain cell.
You don't have to be Elon Musk to see what's going on here, what's been going on here, what I've been talking about here on this channel for about 4 going on 5 years.
Errol Spence Jr. and his handlers, because he is handled. He doesn't have a mind of his own. He's not his own boss.
They would rather Errol go in there against anyone but Terrence Crawford. It's been built up too much.
Don't forget that they were willing to sacrifice Errol to Canelo Alvarez after the Plant fight. He was part of the deal they offered him.
It's anyone but Crawford over there on PBC Island, but that's nothing new.
He's not coming back to welterweight after this fight, and if you think he is, hey, I got a bridge I want to sell you.
Fight gets ordered at 147. They have it at 154, and you think he's moving back down.
Fucking bozo.
Elsewhere in the men's welterweight division, Eddie Hearn stated, "Conor has made it clear to me he wants to go straight back in a big fight. I would prefer to have him a run out, but he's made it clear. I want Chris Eubank Jr., I want Gervonta Davis, I want Kell Brook, I want Manny Pacquiao. If we don't get a decision soon from the WBC's investigation, we're going to make a move. Make no mistake, Conor can fight right now, but we want a ruling. He's allowed to fight now, but he doesn't want to fight until his truth comes out."
Conor Benn is still trying to prove his innocence.
Though in truth, it doesn't actually matter if Conor is innocent or not, as those who want to levy criticism against him still will, irrespective of what he comes out and says and what information is made available. This is a stain that will not easily wash out. The saving grace is that the boxing fans are not as altruistic as they make themselves out to be. If they were really concerned about doping in the sport of boxing,
they're going to use this against him every chance that they get.
but it's not really because they care about a cleaner sport. It's become the trendy thing to do to take the piss out of Eddie Hearn, Matchroom, and Matchroom fighters. For whatever reason, there are those out there who really get a kick out of that.
I don't know what the fascination is.
Most of these individuals just so happen to be big Tyson Fury fans. Tyson Fury, who he himself tested positive for a banned substance.
Nandrolone after the Klitschko fight, an anabolic steroid.
You bring that up, and the double standards, the hypocrisy, will be showcased on full display. So believe me when I tell you that this is not about wanting a cleaner sport. I mean, one of Frank Warren's boys, Zolani Tete. He's been a Frank Warren fighter for as long as I can remember, and he just tested positive for a banned substance. And he tested positive for a banned substance many weeks before the news actually broke, the same as Conor Benn, but you don't see anybody losing their minds about it.
Selective outrage.
It's not about doping. They don't care about doping. But the saving grace and the silver lining for Conor Benn is that a lot of fighters test positive for banned substances, and a lot of fighters end up right back in the sport due to its revolving door policy.
They only pretend it's a big deal, but they really don't.
They don't care. The same people lambasting Conor Benn now are the same people who would readily watch his next fight.
Eddie Hearn mentioned Chris Eubank, Gervonta Davis, Manny Pacquiao, and Kell Brook.
Kell Brook, who before that entire fiasco kicked off, was eyeing the winner of the proposed Conor Benn versus Chris Eubank Jr. fight. As it stands, I view Kell Brook as the more realistic opponent of the aforementioned four names, Gervonta Davis, Manny Pacquiao, and Chris Eubank Jr. Chris is about to take on Liam Smith later on this month.
News broke yesterday that DAZN picked up the foreign rights to the fight outside of the United Kingdom. In the UK, it's going to be shown on Sky.
Canada and the United States, it's going to be shown on DAZN. Perhaps a foreshadowing of things to come, that fight isn't really dead, the fight between Conor Benn and Chris Eubank Jr., that there is an active effort to revisit it and get it across the finish line.
So I don't think that's going to be Conor's next fight. I think we might see him share the ring with Kell Brook en route to Chris Eubank Jr.
At either junior middle or middle, it's a distinct possibility. Conor's been out a while, and it's not conceivable he's going to return to welterweight when he's looking at fights with guys like Kell Brook and Chris Eubank.
Well, what about Gervonta Davis?
What about him? He's not going to fight Conor Benn. Listen,
look,
could the fight make a lot of money if you did the fight between Conor's fans in the UK and Gervonta's fans in the US? Of course it could.
But you and I both know it's not going to happen.
Gervonta Davis may as well be participating in a different sport than Conor Benn. Really, many of those PBC fighters, a good number of them, they may as well be participating in a different sport entirely than, say, a matchroom fighter or a top-ranked fighter.
Look at what happened the last time they let somebody else's fighter hop over their fence and come to the party.
Wilder got annihilated. Their prize stallion in the men's heavyweight division got destroyed, and he's never been the same since. They're not about to make that mistake again.
So where does that leave Ryan Garcia versus Gervonta Davis?
Where indeed? How many of you out there really believe that fight is going to happen this April, the same month as Spence versus Thurman? That's a story that only time can tell. But in a nutshell, Conor Benn versus Gervonta Davis, money fight that it could be, it's not going to happen.
It's not going to happen anytime soon? If ever.
Gervonta Davis is not a viable option for Conor Benn. Kell Brook is.
If that fight were to get announced, it'd get criticized at first, but the night of,
the Brits would turn out for that fight in droves if you made it.
I only wonder if DAZN would elect to bill it as a box office fight in the UK, not likely in the US.
The core audience for such a match is a British one, and we know that Kell Brook's last fight was a box office fight on Sky Sports. Opposite the ring, his longtime rival, Amir King Khan.
It's possible that Brook versus Benn would be billed as a box office fight too, at least over there.
Not over here. They're all the same. It is a distinct possibility. I could see that fight materializing later on this year. Finally, one division south at junior welter, former 140-pound champion Jose Ramirez looks forward to in-house fights with Lopez. Haney says, I don't need Regis.
Maybe not, but you don't want him either.
So if in the years to come people start to wonder why that fight between you two didn't happen, we'll know why. Jose Ramirez is less anxious about his future because his prospects are not completely bound up in a Prograis fight, given that there are possible bouts with Lopez and Haney down the line. What I'm excited for is that there are great 140-pound fighters. Ramirez said on the boxing podcast with Chris Mannix, Devin Haney, he's moving up to 140 soon. Teofimo Lopez just moved up to 140. Ryan Garcia is at 140 now. Those names, especially Teofimo and Devin Haney, who are in-house fighters on this side of the pond, those fights can be made. So I don't need Regis at the end of the day. And that's what gives me a little bit of stability and is what keeps me composed, knowing that sooner or later, those fights will come.
This fight was supposed to go down years ago in 2018. Jose Ramirez, he didn't want it then. He doesn't want it now.
Being a free agent opens up a whole amount of opportunity, Ramirez said. Top Rank obviously wants me to re-sign with them. They need to feed me a guy like Teofimo or a guy like Devin Haney because that's who I am. I have to take care of my future, you know? I'm not just a dumb guy. I would like to fight early this year. That's why I want to move forward with my career, to get one fight out the way, and the second one will be my last one with Top Rank. Either they give me a good name or I sign with another promoter. Again, the minimums are in my bag, so financially, I'm going to be okay. I've done okay in my career. I've done just fine, but I'm in the driver's seat. I'm going to start asking for fights. Let's get it on. I know Teofimo isn't dumb enough to take 30% of an unknown number in a fight with Prograis.
Teofimo started singing a very similar tune a few days ago to Jose Ramirez's tune, that Regis Prograis, being a Pro Bellum fighter and top-rank impresario Bob Arum, not wanting to work with Pro Bellum or their fighters.
The fight between them is isn't likely to happen, which is pretty much what I surmised from all of this, that if Top Rank doesn't want to work with Regis to make a Ramirez fight, they're not going to want to work with him to make a Lopez fight either.
These fights ain't happening.
Teofimo Lopez and Jose Ramirez would sooner end up fighting each other than facing Regis Prograis, and Jose said, I know Top Rank has had inside talks and are interested in making that fight happen. Ramirez said of a potential matchup with Lopez. It's a big fight on ESPN, and it's in-house. Now, Devin Haney is moving up too. That's another big fight. I can put myself in the rankings in the WBO and work my way up. If I beat Teofimo, that puts me real high in the WBO.
Jose Ramirez raised a valid point about Bob Arum's aversion to working with Probellum and their fighters.
It's true that Bob Arum said these things, but if you formulate an offer for a Regis Prograis in order to do the fight on your side of things, it's a top-ranked promotion, not necessarily involving Probellum.
Just Regis.
That doesn't equate to being in bed with Probellum or working with Probellum alongside them. It really doesn't. Probellum doesn't even have a broadcast partner. It's a smokescreen.
It's an excuse not to do the fight because you have other plans for your fighters that you actually have under contract, like Teofimo, like Jose.
Unlike Regis Prograis. Why would you want to let that guy hop the fence and beat up your guys when you don't have him under contract? That makes doing a fight with him rather unattractive, and he's not going to fight on the cheap either.
Of course not. He's a champion. He made over $1 million in his last fight.
Without condoning or condemning, I'm just giving it to you straight because it's the only way I know how to give it to you, and that is Top Rank's hierarchy of thought. Their rationale.
Why would we put one of our own guys in harm's way? Why would we feed one of our guys to Regis when he ain't our fighter? We're not invested in his career.
They are protecting Jose Ramirez from Regis Prograis. They're protecting Teofimo Lopez as well.
They're protecting those guys. They'd rather have them fight each other than let Regis go in there with one of them, because he'll beat them both.
I'd pick Regis Prograis to beat the both of those guys comfortably. That's what I'd do if a fight between them were to materialize, but it won't. So the question is, where will Regis go? Will he go to Black Prime?
He go to the PBC. They got a couple of world titles over there that he can unify.
But do they have the kind of money he wants to make fight by fight?
Where's Regis gonna go? What's he gonna do?